The cameras were rolling, the audience was laughing, and Steve Harvey was doing what he does best, making a room full of strangers feel like family. But then, in the middle of a question, something shifted. A contestant said 5 words that stopped everything. Steve's smile faded. His hand froze on the cards. The studio went silent. What happened next wasn't in the script, wasn't rehearsed, and wasn't something anyone expected to see on a game show. Because in that moment, Steve Harvey stopped being a host. He became something else entirely, a man standing in front of another man's grief, refusing to look away. It was supposed to be just another taping of Family Feud. The Johnson family stood on one side of the stage, nervous but excited. On the other side, the Martinez family, equally eager to win. The lights were bright, the energy was high, and Steve was in his element, cracking jokes, teasing contestants, doing his signature reactions that have made him one of the most beloved hosts in television history. But there was something different about one of the contestants. Michael, a 52-year-old man standing third in line on the Johnson family side, wasn't laughing as much as the others. His smile was there, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. His family members kept glancing at him, touching his shoulder, as if checking to make sure he was okay. Steve noticed it too, though he didn't say anything yet. He's been doing this long enough to read a room, to sense when someone is carrying something heavy. The game progressed normally. Buzzer sounds, funny answers, Steve's exaggerated reactions, all the elements that make Family Feud the comfort show it is. But every time the camera panned to Michael, there was that same look. A man present in body but somewhere else in spirit. Then came the fast money round. Michael's niece had just finished her turn, and now it was Michael's moment. Steve walked over with his usual swagger, cards in hand, ready to fire off questions. "All right, Michael," Steve said, his voice warm. "You ready to bring this home for your family?" Michael nodded, but his hands were shaking slightly. Steve stopped mid-joke. The entire studio froze. "We need 200 points to win," Steve continued, but his tone had shifted. He was watching Michael more carefully now. "First question, name something people say lasts forever." Michael didn't hesitate. "Love." Steve nodded, moved to the next question. "Name something that gets better with time." "Memories," Michael answered, his voice cracking slightly. The audience shifted in their seats. Something was happening, but no one could quite name it yet. "Name something you hold on to even when it's time to let go." Michael's eyes filled with tears. He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally said, "The past." Steve's expression changed. The entertainer's mask slipped, and something raw appeared underneath. He looked at Michael, really looked at him, and in that moment, 20 years of hosting experience told him that this wasn't about a game show anymore. "Name something." Steve's voice was quieter now. "That you wish you could bring back." Michael's answer came out as barely a whisper, but every microphone in that studio caught it. "My wife." The silence that followed was deafening. No buzzers, no laughter, no applause. Just the hum of the studio lights and the sound of Michael trying not to break down completely. Steve Harvey did something then that no one in that studio, crew members who'd worked there for years, audience members who'd watched hundreds of episodes, had ever seen him do. He put down his cards. He turned away from the camera. He walked directly to Michael, and without a word, he pulled him into an embrace. The producers in the booth didn't know what to do. The cameras kept rolling because no one had the presence of mind to yell cut. And in that moment, Steve Harvey wasn't the host of Family Feud. He was just a man standing with another man in his grief, refusing to let him face it alone. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. What no one in the audience knew, what the cameras hadn't captured, was the conversation that had happened earlier that day, before the taping began. Michael's family had almost cancelled. They'd driven 3 hours to get to the studio, but when they pulled into the parking lot, Michael had broken down. He couldn't do it. Couldn't pretend to be happy, couldn't smile for the cameras, couldn't act like his world hadn't ended 6 months ago when his wife of 28 years lost her battle with cancer. His daughter had held his hand in the parking lot. "Mom wanted this," she'd said. "She made us promise. She said we had to come here, had to do this as a family, had to keep living even after she was gone." Michael had applied to be on Family Feud 2 years ago. It was his wife's favorite show. She'd watch it every night while making dinner, would call out answers, would laugh at Steve's reactions. When they got the call that they'd been selected, she was already sick, but she was still fighting. She'd made Michael promise that no matter what happened, the family would go. It would be their way of honoring her memory, of doing something together, of proving that love doesn't end just because life does. So Michael had walked into that studio carrying not just his own grief, but the weight of a promise made to a dying woman. And now, standing in Steve Harvey's arms, that weight was crushing him. Behind the scenes, Steve made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. The usual protocol is simple: keep the show moving, maintain the energy, don't let personal moments derail the production. There are schedules to keep, commercial breaks to hit, a whole system designed to keep entertainment flowing smoothly. But Steve Harvey looked at the producers through the glass and shook his head. "Not today." He kept his arm around Michael and spoke softly, not into the microphone, but directly to him. The audience couldn't hear what was being said, but they could see it, could see the way Michael's shoulders shook, the way Steve's hand stayed firm on his back, the way two men who were strangers an hour ago were connected by something deeper than a game show could ever manufacture. When Steve finally stepped back, his own eyes were wet. He looked at Michael's family, standing frozen at their podium. "Come here," he said. Not as a host giving a direction, but as a person inviting others into a moment of shared humanity. They came. Michael's daughter, his son, his sister, his niece, they all gathered around him. And the opposing family, the Martinez family who were supposed to be competitors, they came too. They crossed that dividing line in the middle of the stage and joined the circle. Because that's what happens when real grief enters a room. Competition falls away. Strategy disappears. What remains is just people, recognizing pain, and choosing to stand in it together rather than look away. Steve took the microphone then, and when he spoke, his voice had none of its usual performance quality. It was just honest. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said to the audience, "I've been doing this show for years. I've seen funny answers, I've seen shocking answers, I've seen answers that made no sense whatsoever." A small laugh rippled through the crowd. "But what I've never seen, what I hope I get to see more of, is this kind of courage. Michael, you came here today carrying something that would have broken most people. You showed up. You honored your wife's memory. And you reminded all of us what this show, what all of this, is really about. It's not about winning money or getting on TV. It's about family. It's about showing up for each other. It's about proving that love, real love, doesn't stop just because someone's not here anymore." He turned to Michael. "Your wife knew what she was doing when she made you promise to come here. She wasn't just giving you a game show. She was giving you a reason to gather, to be together, to remember that life keeps going and that it's okay to keep living it. That's not betraying her memory. That's honoring it. But this is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming." Steve reached into his pocket and pulled out his business card. But he didn't just hand it to Michael. He took out a pen and wrote something on the back. Then he took off his suit jacket, the one he'd been wearing all day, the one with the designer label and the perfect fit, and he draped it over Michael's shoulders. "This might seem like just a jacket," Steve said, "but I want you to have it. I want you to remember this day. I want you to remember that you walked into this studio broken, and you walked out surrounded. That's what community does. That's what showing up does. Your wife is still teaching you, Michael. She's still loving you. Because love," he paused, his voice thick, "love is stronger than time." The audience erupted. Not with the usual applause for a good answer or a funny moment. This was different. People were standing, crying, holding each other. The camera operators had tears streaming down their faces. A producer in the booth was openly sobbing. Because everyone in that space understood they weren't watching entertainment anymore. They were witnessing something sacred. The moment when a man drowning in grief was pulled to the surface by the hand of a stranger who refused to let him go under alone. Michael clutched the jacket, his fingers gripping the fabric like a lifeline. He looked at Steve and managed to say, "Thank you. She loved you. She loved this show. She would have loved this moment. She's here," Steve said simply. "I don't know much about what happens after, but I know love like that doesn't just disappear. It changes form, but it doesn't leave. She's here, brother. And she's proud of you." The taping didn't resume normally after that. How could it? The producers ended up scrapping the standard format and instead aired something unprecedented, an extended episode that included the full moment, unedited, with Steve sitting down with Michael's family afterwards to talk about grief, about loss, about the ways we honor those who've left us by continuing to live fully and love deeply. The episode, when it aired, broke records. Not because of the gameplay, but because millions of people saw themselves in Michael. Saw their own losses, their own grief, their own struggles to keep going when someone they loved was gone. The comment sections filled with stories, widows and widowers sharing how they'd kept living, parents who'd lost children explaining how they found meaning again, adult children who'd lost parents describing the ways they kept their memory alive. And Steve Harvey, who'd been famous for his humor and his reactions and his ability to make people laugh, became known for something else too, his willingness to stop the show, to break the format, to choose humanity over entertainment. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. In the months that followed, Steve talked about that taping in interviews. He said it changed him, reminded him why he does what he does. "I'm not just here to make people laugh," he explained. "I'm here to make people feel seen. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is just stop. Stop performing, stop entertaining, stop maintaining the illusion that everything's always light and fun. Sometimes you just stop and say, I see you. I see your pain. And I'm not going anywhere." The jacket became something of a symbol. Michael kept it, of course, hung it in his closet next to his wife's favorite dress. He said in a later interview that on hard days, he'd touch it and remember that moment. Remember being surrounded, remember being held, remember being told that his love was stronger than time. Steve's business card, with whatever Steve had written on the back, Michael never shared publicly. Some things are meant to stay private, to remain sacred between two people who shared a moment that transcended television. But Michael did say this. "Whatever he wrote reminded me that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about carrying forward. It's about taking all that love and letting it fuel how you live, not letting it paralyze you where you are." The other families from that taping, including the Martinez family who'd been competing against the Johnsons, stayed in touch. They created a group chat, started meeting up for dinners, became friends in the way that only people who've witnessed something transformative together can become friends. They attended Michael's daughter's wedding. They visited his wife's grave. They showed up, again and again, proving that what happened on that stage wasn't just a moment, it was a beginning. And Steve Harvey continued hosting Family Feud, continued making people laugh, continued being the face of one of television's most enduring shows. But everyone who worked with him said something shifted after that day. He was still funny, still quick with a joke, still gave those reactions that went viral. But he was also more present, more willing to slow down, more attuned to the people standing in front of him. He'd learned, or perhaps relearned, that the best moments aren't always the funniest ones. Sometimes the best moments are when you drop everything and just be human with someone who needs it. The episode title that aired was simple. Love is stronger than time. It wasn't a question from the board. It wasn't an answer that won points. It was a truth, spoken by a grieving man and affirmed by a host who understood that some truths matter more than any game. Years later, when people talk about Steve Harvey's legacy, they mention his comedy specials, his books, his radio show. But those who were there that day, those who witnessed what happened when protocol was broken and humanity took over, they talk about something else. They talk about the moment a game show host became a healer. The moment entertainment became communion. The moment one man's grief was met with another man's compassion, and an entire studio learned that the strongest force in any room isn't laughter or competition or winning. It's love. And it's always stronger than time.